We're just chatting about weddings and babies and all the things. It's so great to see you again. I'm so happy to have you back on.
3.5 years later, full
Crazy.
circle moment.
So much has changed. Like I was telling you before we started recording, the first episode that we did, I had so many aha moments reading your book and through that conversation. So when I heard about this new book that you were doing, I was like, this is, first of all, fascinating, but also this is like, I think, an answer that a lot of people need, that they're searching for. And I feel very confident that our conversation today is going to give a lot of our listeners answers that they might not even known the questions that they had before. It's going to make a lot of sense for a lot of people. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. And, it wasn't a very long time between books, and it was very fast for the publishing industry, but I just felt like it needed to be now. I sort of saw the world changing in this direction, and it wasn't ideal for me. I had a newborn when I started working on this book, but I just sort of thought, okay, climate events, there were a lot of wildfires happening at the time. We were still unsure if Joe Biden was going to run or not, or if it was going to be Kamala. I mean, there was just so much up in the air in summer of 2024 when I started working on this. And I also felt as a new mom, this is the time to do it. It's a book about change, it's a book about uncertainty and disruption. Why not write as I'm experiencing the most uncertainty and disruption I've ever felt in my life as a first time mom and someone who's just living in this world that is in flux? So I think it came at the right time for me personally. And here we are today.
Even back then in summer of 2024, we didn't even know the insane change and craziness that I feel like was going to be coming now. So is it wild for you to be like, oh, yeah, this is not only just what I needed and what fit my period of life, but this is kind of like what the world needs now?
I love your podcast because you talk a lot about mindset, intention, intuition. And I I had a sense. I sort of had the sense that was like, work on this book, work on it now, get it done quickly, in the off chance that we're not even at peak instability, peak uncertainty yet. And so while I do not relish reading very surprising and strange news headlines, I definitely felt like there was a chance that that might be happening. And I think all of us have been experiencing some level of this since 2020, when for many of us, our carefully constructed universes were turned upside down for the first time ever. And suddenly things were very much outside of our control. No matter how much of an organized, planful person you were, there was no way to predict the future. Our story now is a continuation of 2020 that keeps ramping and ramping. And just when you think it can't change even more, something like AI comes in. And then suddenly that's all changing. And so the way I see it is that change is not linear anymore, it's exponential. And this is not a blip. It's just the way the world is now.
It's just the way the world is. Yeah. And we have to like shift with it. And
Yes.
we're aware of how much change is going on between just things with government, politics, AI. Like there's so many changes. What made you realize, oh, there's a whole new skill set and a whole new definition of success that people need in order to be successful in today's world?
My big aha moment was truly almost 10 years ago. And it was when I was working in venture capital. And my boss said, Liz, I would love for you to, because you know our founders super well, just come up with a list of 5 to 10 attributes that all the most successful founders have in common. Thought, easy, probably something like ambition, you went to a great school, whatever it is. And I interviewed dozens of founders who had had good outcomes. And I asked them about their childhoods. I gave them personality assessments. And at the end of the day, the only thing they had in common was that they were always changing themselves. These people were so different. Some had gone to Ivy League schools, some hadn't even graduated from high school. Some people were introverted, some people were extremely social and extroverted. Like it didn't map. Some came up through computer science, some people came in through architecture. It was just so random. But that was the main skill. And I remember taking note of it at that moment. I was like, these people are always growing, they're always evolving. And on top of that, when change happens to them, they can handle it with a certain level of grace and embracing it. I put it aside for a little bit. And when I started noticing during the pandemic that some of my clients were, I'm an executive coach to CEOs and founders, Some people were thriving and some people were really falling apart. And it wasn't a correlation between how smart they were or what their resources were. It was a psychological gap. It was a way of seeing the world. And that's actually when I started to realize that the biggest delta in people, the biggest divide, is not intellectual, it's not resource based, it's actually psychological. And it's whether or not you are completely undone by change, uncertainty, and disappointment, or if you learn to embrace it and see it as something that is happening for you. It's not an easy mindset to have. And that trend continued onward. And then finally, it was during this moment in 2024 when I thought, I have to write this book now because I've been seeing this trend go on actually for a long time. But the moment I think is now.
So do you look at it as the ability to adapt with change has always been a huge proponent of success? Do you think that there is more change in today's world, or is it just that IQ and EQ and these other things do not actually get us as far anymore, and that's the difference?
Yes. So IQ and EQ are very much a construct of their time. IQ started almost 150 years ago. So our modern
Wow.
understanding of intelligence is only 150 years old. And it started in the late 1800s in France when kids were suddenly required to go to school. And the French government needed a way to take all these kids from different backgrounds and sort and place them into the right classrooms. They hired two psychologists to do this. And that became what we now know as the Stanford Binet IQ test. And now the government uses it, the military uses it, school systems use it. It's the basis for how we understand cognitive intelligence because in this industrial revolution of the late 1800s, suddenly people were going from working in their family businesses, their household farms, to going off to the cities to try their hand at industrial life. So IQ is very much a product of industrialization. Fast forward to the 1990s, where suddenly the world is global. We can communicate with people in different countries, and we're shifting from industrialization to knowledge work. So you're not just doing the specific thing that you need to be smart enough to do. You might be a manager, a knowledge worker, a steward of work who's not actually doing the thing, but you have to collaborate, communicate, work across cultures. So suddenly, how well you respond interpersonally becomes the gold standard of success. It's not just about you and your work, it's about you and a team of people needing to march in step together. Now we are 35 years later, and our time is no longer defined by industrialization. It's no longer defined by globalization. These are all old hat. We are defined by this technology revolution that is happening, where AI is disrupting everything. And also, there's been a lot of change geopolitically, climate events with our health and our wellness and our understanding of knowledge. And it's not to say that IQ and EQ aren't important, but they just aren't the primary skill to address what our needs are today. For instance, IQ is very much about how you memorize, process, and synthesize information. AI can do that better than anyone can, even the greatest genius. AI, these newer large language models, they beat us. They're scoring the 99th percentile on IQ tests, the LSAT, SATs. We can't even compete. It's made IQ suddenly accessible to everyone at just the click of the keyboard. We are all on an even playing field, which is actually really beautiful because it makes room for people who haven't felt that they are conventionally smart. I think EQ and AQ are still very intertwined and very related. I find that people who have very high EQ tend to also map to AQ. But something I think is really nice is that AQ is something that you can get from practice, I think, a lot more easily than EQ. It's something that we can be learning and growing. And I also believe that it's our birthright. We all innately have it. We just haven't had the language or the prioritization to focus on honing it. And so, my hope is that with this book, we realize how important it is. And we also feel empowered to go out and make our decisions and express ourselves for the sake of growing our AQ.
Can you define what is AQ? Why is it the most important factor for shaping how we interact, connect, and thrive in our careers and in our lives in general?
AQ stands for your agility quotient, and it's your capacity to handle change, disappointment, and uncertainty without losing your footing. The reason why it is so important is because that is the fundamental skill that we're looking for today because the world is changing so dramatically. And high AQ people, there are a lot of skills that flow into that. So it's sort of a catch all for a few different skills, including adaptability, learning agility. So, how quickly you're willing to be a beginner again and try something new. Risk tolerance is another one, and an openness, a curiosity. So, there are several factors that play into your overall AQ, but think of it as sort of a standalone intelligence that encapsulates all of those skills. And it basically expresses the way that you respond when life doesn't go the way that you thought it would.
I know you've worked with hundreds of high performing leaders. So, how does this look tangibly? Like, how have you seen someone's life or career change once they understand and start building their AQ?
Yeah. So I think of AQ as there are three levels of it: low, medium, and high. And the lowest level can really hold you back from getting what you want. And I call that the avoidant stage. That is when things are happening in your life that are distressing or volatile, and you ignore them. You put your head in the sand. And it can look like maybe things are changing at work, the culture is shifting. You don't want to admit it because you've worked there for 7 years, or your job doesn't have the same earning potential as it did when you started in that field. And instead of directly acknowledging it, maybe that looks like you don't want to talk about it, you don't want to think about it, you drink a little bit more wine or watch a little more Netflix than you normally do, or you just say, this is a passing fad. I don't, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. And what that can actually do with leaders, when I watch them ignore tariff changes, competitive markets, their ineffectiveness in a situation, when they ignore it, they're actually subconsciously telling yourself, you can't do that. You can't handle it. And it really takes a toll on their self confidence. And that's actually where low AQ can become this self reinforcing cycle where you don't believe that you can handle what's going on. And so you ignore it. And the more you ignore it, the more you feel like ill equipped, that you can't do it. And so it actually compounds to making you feel like you have imposter syndrome or you're not as good as you actually are. The next stage is middle stage AQ, which we'll call the fighting stage. And this is when you get some more confidence and you start to take action and be proactive. So imagine that something is changing in your life, like you're moving to a new city, or let's give an example at work with some of my clients where let's say revenue is down from growing for years, and suddenly you have a really bad quarter. You might roll up your sleeves and say, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to look at metrics. We're going to change the team. We're going to fire people. We're going to hire people. And you are feeling confident enough to go after your dreams, but you're not enjoying it. You're having a hard time. You're feeling very much a victim mindset. Why is this happening to me? I'm so annoyed. Why am I in this situation? Why do I have to deal with this? So the fighting stage can be very effective, but what it leads to is resentment, burnout, and generally being in a bad mood. Like you're not enjoying your life. You're not present pilot in your own life. You feel like something's happening to you, not happening for you. Then when you can reach the highest level of AQ is when you start to realize that all of these things that you didn't ask for might actually be happening for your greatest benefit. You start to see the silver lining in things, or at least appreciate that you're learning, you're growing. And this is really important because change is a constant in life. The only constant is change. And unless we can learn to not just survive, right? Survive is level 2 AQ, but to thrive, be happy, and have fun, that's when you've reached full AQ. And isn't that what we all want for life? Is to not only be successful, but to also enjoy ourselves along the way.
Mm.
So when I see my clients in level 2, they're having a hard time, they're fighting. When they move to level 3, their actions might not look any different. They might be taking the same path forward, but their mindset has shifted dramatically. And that gives them more energy, more life force, and more of a mission to become successful in what they do.
So it really comes down to like the difference between level 2 and 3 is really just the belief of I can accept change and I will be okay through it. It's almost like confidence, it seems like, is the difference between 2 and 3.
Yes, exactly. The mantra that I always talk about for level 3 is I love change and change loves me.
Mm, I love
And
that.
level 2 is a little bit more like I will tolerate change and I'm good enough to handle it.
Whereas level 1 is
Right?
like change is awful and scary and this means something bad.
Exactly. And
Mm,
I can't handle it.
and I
I
can't
can't do
handle
it.
it. It is really interesting how confidence is so tied to this because I totally see that how it's this reinforcing loop. If you they're like, oh, change is not something I deal with well. Or I feel like I see this a lot with leaders receiving feedback and it's really easy to like ignore it because that means something about my confidence. Oh, am I not really good leader? So it's easier to just ignore it or pretend like you're not a problem. It's not your fault. And then it becomes a cycle because you don't then get over things and become a better leader versus if you're like, amazing feedback. Thank you so much for sharing with me. Let me think about that. Let me see how that's actually affecting my career, my company, and then shifting. And then it's like learning from that and growing and becoming better. That's where the confidence comes in.
100%. And I love what you're saying because I think most people think that to be confident, you have to be impenetrable. You have to be perfect at everything. But studies have actually shown there was a study from Harvard that showed that actually the people who ask the most questions are regarded as the most credible and the smartest because they have the confidence to admit that they don't know, which I think is really cool,
Really
especially as
cool.
women, where I have definitely felt the pressure to have everything together and to always have an answer. And if I don't, I'm held to a different standard than maybe a male counterpart. But once I learned that statistic, I could see myself differently where I was like, you know what? I am confident enough in myself and in my core abilities to know that even if I don't know the answer, I'm going to ask the question and I'm going to learn it.
Learning and growth are so tied to that AQ. So if you are asking questions, if you're saying, I don't know this or I don't know what to do about this, but you're asking the question that inherently implies you want to learn, you want to grow and get better in that. Whereas not asking the question is like, I don't need to grow in that. I don't need to do anything differently. So inherently, it's about growth.
Yes. And my favorite business example is from 2014 when Satya Nadella, who's still the CEO of Microsoft, he took over as CEO then. And there was so much for him to do from a practical strategy standpoint. But the first thing he did was he basically said, this is a very low, he didn't use the words AQ, but it was a low AQ culture. And the stock price hadn't moved in 10 years. They had missed out on big trends like mobile and social. And he said, it's because the people here, they want to be know it alls. They want to be the smartest person in the room. So we're going to shift intentionally from a know it all culture to a learn it all culture. I don't care if we have to fire people who have been here for 25 years. Unless you're on board with this learn it all culture, you're not going to make it. And so he printed posters. They made coffee mugs. They had all these mottos about being a lifelong learner. And it worked. Like, look where they are today. They've actually become leaders and proponents of the AI space, which you never would have thought would be possible 10 years ago. His understanding that there needed to be a psychological shift before there could be a performance shift, I think is really powerful.
Starting with the psychology, mindset is everything. It determines the actions and the outcomes of a company. That is a really fascinating example. And I was wondering about that of like if you notice either within yourself or you manage a team, you own your own business and you notice low AQ either in yourself or in your team, what are some things that you can do to shift that? And also, what should we look for as high AQ in someone we want to hire or if we're going to a new company?
The first thing I would say is you have to learn what your AQ archetype is. There are
Yes. Oh, I can't
four.
wait for you to get into this. Yes.
Do you know what yours is, by the way?
No, I don't. I'm really curious. I'm curious, yeah, what you think and like learning there. So tell me about what each four of them are.
They are your style for how you handle change, disappointment, and uncertainty. It's your toolkit for how you react. And they are all capable of being super high AQ. They can all be at that level 3. And they are the astronaut, the firefighter, the novelist, and the neurosurgeon. I'll briefly explain each. So everyone follow along and maybe jot down if you think one of them sounds like you or sounds like your partner, sounds like your boss. The first is the astronaut. Most classically, high AQ. Think about an astronaut floating around in space. They're at the forefront of innovation. These are the types of people who love, love, love growing, changing, pushing themselves. They're always reading up about the latest research. They have a vision for the future that maybe seems pretty audacious, and they're really fast to pivot and make decisions. You might be an astronaut if you find that you're confusing to people. Like people don't always understand your vision. You're very clearly trying to manifest something that maybe other people say that's not possible, or I don't understand what you're doing, or why did you change so quickly? And they are very high AQ, but the hard part is that they need to learn how to get other people along on the journey for them, with them too, because they're not the most high detail, they're not the most diligent, and they need others to turn these pipe dreams into a step by step reality. So that's the astronaut. The next one is the opposite, which is the neurosurgeon. And think about how a neurosurgeon is in school for 15 years before they even start practicing medicine. Neurosurgeons are motivated by excellence, so they have a very high degree of standard. They're perfectionists. They might work on something for 40 hours that someone else would spend 10 hours on. And they notice all the imperfections and the details. They're their own worst critics. They're slow though, because they want to get it right. And so you might think that they're low AQ because they're not so quick to respond to change, but they can actually be super high AQ because once they finally decide that they want something, then they won't stop until they get it. So my favorite example is a friend of mine who is a neurosurgeon. His job is chief legal officer, right? Makes a lot of sense in the details. Went to law school. He was single for a very, very long time. And finally, he met someone that he was like, I want to marry this woman. It was a friend of his, a coworker, and once he decided on her, he did everything he could until she agreed to go on a date with him. And
That's
then he
so
didn't give up
sweet.
until she married him. So that's a classic neurosurgeon. You stay single for a long time, or you look for a house for 10 years before you finally pull the trigger, or you think about changing careers for like 8 years before you finally do it. But once you do it, you're unstoppable. You're resilient. You have grit. Next, we have the novelist. I'm a novelist. We love planning. Novelists have an agenda, they have a 5-year goal, they are trying to manifest something at all times. They're super organized. So they're really good at proactive change, which is the change that you invite for yourself. I'm always doing some sort of goal, like exercise, go to Pilates 3 times a week, whatever, drink all this water, whatever it is. I'm always switching that up. But I'm really bad at reactive change, which is a change that I did not plan or ask for. So when a flight gets canceled on the way to my last book event, I went straight from the airport to the event and I opened up my makeup bag to fix my makeup, and my blush had broken and it went all over my white dress. And I just started
No.
crying. I was crying, which is a little bit of an outsized reaction, right? And I just couldn't handle it because I had planned everything perfectly. I was like, getting on this flight, I packed my bag, I have my dress and my shoes, blah, blah, blah. It's timed so perfectly. And then my assistant, who is a firefighter, that's the opposite of the novelist. They're great in emergency situations. She immediately pulls out a napkin, gets her water bottle, Googles what to do, doing my dress. And she's like, it's okay, Liz, you're going to be totally fine. No one will even notice. And she's calm as a cucumber, and she's a firefighter. So that is the difference. The firefighter is great in emergency situations. They're calm under chaos. It's who you want in your corner, but they're not so planful because they figure I can fix anything
Mm.
spontaneously. So why even plan for the future?
Do you want to find someone who's kind of opposite you? Like if it's your assistant, if it's your boss, like someone you work with, you want to be opposite? Or is it more like you want to change your skills to adapt based on what archetype you are?
Great question. I think that we should all have what I call your agility advisors, people from all sorts of different archetypes in your life who you can ask for the specific thing that you need. So, for instance, when I was planning out my book tour, I knew I was going to be 36 weeks pregnant. And I asked my neurosurgeon friend, can you look at this very aggressive travel schedule and tell me everything you think could go wrong? And she did, and it scared me, but it prepared me too. And then I went to an astronaut and I said, what do you think about this book tour? And my astronaut friend said, you could probably get a sponsorship here. You could probably partner with this organization here. You could probably talk to my friend who runs this mom's group, and then she can help you bring people to this event. And she just had so many ideas for me that were hopeful and dreamy and expansive. And so those two combined just helped me really flesh out how great this book tour could be and also to make myself fully prepared. So I think you want to work with all sorts of different people. Well, the goal is for yourself to be able to see from all those perspectives as well. And even if you can't be as good at, say, firefighting as a firefighter is, at least you can learn to appreciate them and know that their way has validity too.
When you put these names to it, like when you give this an archetype, it also does make sense. Like hearing you talk about it, I thought I was a little bit more the neurosurgeon, but now hearing you talk, I'm like, I actually think I'm a little more of the novelist. I can change better than maybe I initially thought when I was like learning about these archetypes, but something goes wrong and it's like, oh my God, I didn't prepare for this. This is stressing me out. And I think just knowing that about yourself though, like just knowing, okay, I know that I'm not good with this type of change. So I know that I'm going to maybe have a little bit of an emotional meltdown. I normally like beat myself up of like, okay, I'm freaking out more than I need to, which like, yes, that's good to realize. But when we know, oh, this is why, it's because I'm a novelist. It's because I have this form of AQ. Even just understanding that helps us cope with the changes that come up in life better.
I completely agree. And I also think you're a novelist because novelists are actually really good at taking in a lot of information and synthesizing it. And that's what you do with your work, right? You have to basically get smart on a new topic every time you do a new episode. And novelists are excellent storytellers, hence why I called it the novelist. And you're able to find that narrative and that through line to these episodes that I thought you were a novelist coming into this. So
Okay,
I just wanted to
interesting.
reinforce.
No, that's
Yeah.
really helpful. I know you really dive in the book on so many there's like so much more to the archetypes than even what we can summarize in this episode that I think a lot of people will feel seen reading through their archetype of like, oh yeah, this is exactly how I am. This is exactly how I work. This is exactly what I need. And it's cool probably for you to be like, oh, everyone around you, you're like, oh, I know what you are. I know what you are. Probably it's very interesting.
It's really interesting and it makes me appreciate the people in my life so much more. And I think that's really true because we tend to not value our own strengths as much as we deserve to because they come naturally to us. We think, oh, everyone must be good at this, or we write them off because we're so comfortable with them. And for me, the archetypes are a way of celebrating ourselves again and remembering that we have these gifts, we have these strengths, even if we sometimes take them for granted. And that's absolutely right. What you were saying before is that instead of being so hard on yourself when, your world, something unexpected happens and you feel really flustered, instead of saying, oh, I need to be better. I need to be a different person. You can say, oh no, you know what? I actually have this whole suite of skills that I use to cope that are extraordinary. And I know that maybe this isn't my forte. That's okay.
Knowing other people's archetype, is there a benefit in that? Like, how do we use that if we know our boss is this archetype, our partner is this archetype? Like, how do we use that knowledge in both personal relationships and professional relationships to strengthen each relationship and the communication?
Give people the jobs that are going to be in their zone of genius, right? If I have a difficult, detailed initiative to get off the ground where I can't afford to make mistakes, I'm going to give it to a neurosurgeon. If it's about quarterly planning and goal setting, I'm going to give that to a novelist. For an astronaut, I might put them against very uncertain moonshot or innovation work. And for a firefighter, I'm going to call on them in really high pressure situations because I know that they're actually going to enjoy them and thrive. And so I think it's a part of matching people to the right zone of genius to the job. And in relationships, it's the same thing too, where with my husband, I know that he's a firefighter And I don't even try to compete on that dimension anymore where I used to. So we're always getting into trouble at the airport, especially since we had a kid. It's like we're always late or I didn't do my TSA pre-check, whatever it is. And I used to try to brainstorm and say, okay, we missed our flight. This is what we do. And I just realized I'm not good at that. I'm just going to sit back. I'm going to go get myself a Coca-Cola and you can decide what we do next. And it's
And he
actually
figures
saved a
that
lot.
out.
Exactly. Instead of me thinking that I'm going to chime in and actually add something of value. And it's similar too, where when we were doing this initiative to figure out where our daughter should go to school, I didn't get mad at him for not doing as much research as I did because I realized I find it soothing to research and he doesn't. And I can take him all this information and he'll write the emails for the school or whatever. But he's not going to sit down on his computer and enjoy a 3-hour research period into Brooklyn preschools. That's fine.
I think you're going to help a lot of romantic relationships with this too. That is so true. And I relate so much to that of in some situations that I'm like, oh, fights are happening because I'm trying to get involved and I'm just adding some emotion. And other times fights happen because I'm like, why aren't you doing this research? But knowing that it's because you're a firefighter, not a novelist like I am, understanding that and then you know their strengths, like what to delegate to, what to release yourself of. And that knowledge is so powerful.
It's been so fun to take this work and talk to people about their romantic relationships because I've learned a lot from it where you see that novelists and firefighters are actually often drawn to one another. And so are novelists and astronauts. You see that pairing a lot together too, where the astronaut has all these dreams and the novelist is like, yeah, I can see that too. And they're kind of always hyping each other up to go for the next horizon because they love thinking about the future. And so then you also see firefighters with neurosurgeons a lot because the neurosurgeon wants to get everything perfect. And the firefighter is a little bit more like, let's live by the seat of our pants. And so it's been great to just meet with people, talk to them about their archetypes, learn what their partners are, and just see how that plays out in the real world is really fun.
If you could walk through what every single archetype, how they would respond if there was a big issue at work, like if there's a problem with the boss or something goes awry, how would each archetype deal with that issue at work?
Yeah. Okay. So let's take the situation is that a long-term client who is like maybe one of the biggest revenue generating clients suddenly tells you and you're the lead on the account that they're switching to a competitor. So maybe we'll use that as the scenario.
Perfect.
So the neurosurgeon, knowing that they want to do everything perfectly, is they would probably call a meeting with the whole department or everyone involved and basically say, before we talk to the client and try to win them back, we need to get all the information about what happened here. What went wrong? Let's look at the logs. Let's look at the details. Who was the last person who talked to them? How has their account been serviced? Let's look at the number of tickets that they've had. How are they performing? And they would want to just make sure that they were doing a very diligent job in understanding the situation. And then they would probably spend a lot of time in meetings trying to put together a plan for what they could offer the client for them to stay with them. Let's put together a proposal. Let's make it look really nice. Let's show up and show them that we know what they need. The firefighter would probably just jump on the phone with the client and call them right away and say, hey, what's going on here? What's your issue? What is your problem? How can I help you? And would actually probably start getting into some real time problem solving with the client. And they would probably come up with a really interesting out of the box situation to say, okay, well, our competitor is going to charge you 30% less than we are. What if we restructure our deal so that 20% is coming from here, 30% is coming here, and then we do a reimbursement so we actually come out cheaper at the end of the day? Something like that. And their solution is probably something that skirts the rules a little bit, that maybe isn't necessarily breaking the rules or illegal, but is certainly in a gray area. And it's fun for them to come up with that solution.
More out of the box.
More out of the box. Exactly. So the novelist would come into the situation and they would basically say, okay, I'm going to realign. I need to basically create a vision that aligns me and the customer together. And so they're probably going to think about, okay, I know what the customer needs. It's more that storytelling. They're going to paint a picture of what happened in the past, all the work that they've done together that's gone really well. So they'll build a whole timeline. Remember when we were with you since the beginning? Remember when we helped you through this hurdle? I know that you want to go to X, Y, and Z. The other person doesn't understand this, and we've already got everything set up to help you do that. The novelist, I call them the novelist also because they like building a time frame. Novelists are really good with time. They remember things really well too. And so they're going to go back into that archive to almost say, look how well I know you. Look at everything we did together. And look how prepared I am to get you the future that you want. And then finally, wait, did we do them all? Oh, the astronaut.
The
That's the last
astronaut.
one. So the astronaut is going to come in and they're basically going to maybe make a beautiful presentation and deck, but they're going to talk to the customer and be like, we have all this innovation coming down the pipeline that you don't even know about. We have this new AI agent that's going to help you do this like at a fraction of this. I know that you care about X, Y, and Z. So I'm going to actually get we're going to hire some people who are in a new department who are going to help you with that. And they're just going to throw all these innovative solutions about the future. And they're basically going to be like, hey, we're in it together, because remember, the astronaut is motivated by passion. So they're going to throw their full passion into this. And they're going to speak the language of motivation, passion, energy, that sort of language to get them excited about a future. Maybe these things exist. Maybe they're going to happen. Maybe they won't. But the astronaut's not going to let that stop them from pitching the client in that way.
And you don't look at it like there's one of these ways was the right way to handle it. It's like they're all right in various situations.
If you can draw from all of them, think about how powerful that pitch is, right? If you could get that all together and know exactly when to pull out that specific tool. So you'd have to really understand the client and know, where do we start? What are they most upset about? So whatever the solution is that addresses that specific thing is maybe where we start. And then once we've regained trust a little bit, this is what we do next. And so I think in my ideal scenario, you have one of each archetype and they do their pre-work of what they think they should do. And then they come together, and then with no ego and with a lot of openness and curiosity, they decide on how and what sequence they can use all these tools and offer them to the customer.
It's probably such a superpower to know whether it's your boss, whether it's a potential client, like to know their archetype, because then you can shift the way that you approach certain things or the way that you speak to them to really speak to their archetype. Like, I think that's like just the roadmap to like getting that client, getting a raise, you're speaking their language, literally.
You know what's interesting is when I was writing the archetypes, I thought about the people who I knew in my life. And then once I wrote the archetypes, I tested it across hundreds of people, gave a lot of people the test. But the original people that I wrote them about were my old bosses, because I felt like I spent all this time trying to think, what does my boss want from me?
So
And I don't
true.
care about that. I remember this one boss I had where he was definitely a neurosurgeon, and it was hard for me to get to that level of detail and to write memos in the way that he wanted. But I know why he did it, and he taught me a lot. And I had another boss who was an astronaut, and I felt like I was always chasing her down to say, okay, so how are we going to do this? Like, I know you said do this thing, but what did you mean by that? And so it's interesting that you mentioned bosses, because I do think a big part of success is to be able to put yourself in another person's shoes and deliver not just what you think is right, but what that audience also sees as the right answer.
I can't think of any job or career where that wouldn't be a huge piece of success. Even if you work in your own company or you are your own boss, you have to probably have clients or people you work with to some capacity that requires a certain sense of, let me understand you and what you think of as success and be able to talk to you in that way, which is really interesting. Then it's knowing your archetype, but also being able to understand and pinpoint archetypes in other people.
Yes. And I think that's where a little bit of, there's an EQ and AQ interplay. Because if you can lean on your EQ a little bit, then you can start to surmise what other people are. Or you can just give them the quiz and ask them and have that conversation, which I'm a fan of because I like doing things directly. And to use that language and say, I know that you're an astronaut. You know that I'm a firefighter. This is how we can work well together, I think is extremely powerful.
So powerful. Oh my gosh, yeah. And like would probably solve a lot of issues, would probably make you a lot more productive. If someone listening is feeling like they are in maybe level 1, maybe level 2 of AQ, especially, again, we're talking about this world where AQ is so important, is required, and yet it's a really hard world in which to foster AQ because we are constantly being fear monger too. We feel like there's no job market opportunities. So if something goes wrong in this company, oh my God, that's the end of the world. It's not like, okay, yay, easy, quick pivot. Like we are constantly wired, I think, to fear change for a lot of reasons. And yet there's so much change where AQ is crucial. So for, I think, a lot of people who might be feeling like, I know that that's like the skill that's going to set me apart, but I don't know how to access that because I'm in such a fear base when it comes to my career. Maybe I'm burnt out. How can we begin to improve our AQ to go from level 1 to level 2 and ideally to level 3?
Yes, there are 4 pillars to AQ. I call them the ABCs. And whenever you're feeling a little bit low AQ, I just say use these as a checklist to make sure that you have enough of them in your life. Because if you're deficient in any number of those 4 pillars, it's probably leading you to be a little bit less high AQ. So the first one is A, and that's for anchors. Anchors, if you think about what an anchor does for a boat, it is a point of stability in very rough seas. It offers grounding. It is something that helps you stay still. And people may not think of anchors as what you need for AQ, but truly, the more your life is disrupted, the more you need consistency to balance it out. So, those are your people, your places, and your routines that give you stability. Could be your partner, could be your yoga teacher, your mom, your dad, your best friend. The places could be like a coffee shop, a third place, your home. And then finally, routines are the things that we do. For me, I mean, it sounds so silly, but like Pilates. Anytime I'm feeling insane, I just go to Pilates. And there's something about it where it's the mind body connection that just really helps me. And even something as simple as having a cup of tea in the afternoons or waking up and getting your coffee the way that you like it, getting in your car and listening to a specific album when you drive to work, whatever it might be, those people, places, and routines, we need them because if it feels like the winds are blowing every which way, you need something to hold on to. So that's A. If you are feeling particularly in level 1 AQ where you're avoiding things, maybe it's because you need a little bit more grounding and stability where you can even start to think about making a change. So ask yourself, do I have the right routines, the right habits? Josie, I know you love your sleep routine. And so
Love.
that's a big part of it. Like, are you literally just nourishing yourself enough to be able to handle this change?
So true.
That's a big one. Get your 8 hours, biggest anchor. B is for bets. Once you have those proper anchors, you can start to take bets. And a bet is an action that you take without knowing what the outcome is going to be. So you're going to feel unprepared, but it's about moving your life forward, trying new things, getting yourself out of your comfort zone. And so this is where you move from level 1 to level 2 because you go from passive to active. So a bet might be as simple as submitting your resume for a new job and trying to apply for one job a day. It could be reaching out to someone on LinkedIn who you don't know to ask for a coffee. It might be even changing your bio on your LinkedIn page to frame yourself in a different way. It might be going to a party that you don't want to go to because you only know 2 people who are going to be there. It's pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. And we need to be taking bets every day. And they don't need to be huge bets like starting a new business, but you need to take bets because if you get really good at the small ones, when the big ones come along, you're not afraid to take a leap.
Mm.
Then we have C for classroom, which is that learn it all mindset we talked about. In this world that is constantly changing, we need to be learning new skills all the time. So I always think everyone should have one thing that they're trying to learn, at least, but just focus on one thing. It might be becoming a better public speaker. It might be reading a book every month. It might be learning how to make a better PowerPoint presentation. Whatever it is, Everyone needs to have a goal because that is the pace at which the world is changing too. And then finally, D, which is my favorite, is this idea of discomfort. And instead of trying to keep our lives as easy and carefree as possible, we look at discomfort when we're feeling overwhelmed, when we're feeling tired, when we're doubting ourselves. And you say, oh, this is a good thing because it means I'm growing my AQ. And the analogy is, when you go to the gym and you're sore the next day, you're like, that was a great workout. I really did a good job. It's the same thing psychologically. If you're having a hard time, you're feeling like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. This is really hard for me. Wow, I'm really pushing myself here. I am growing my AQ. And discomfort then becomes a signal, not that you need to change course, but rather you are doing exactly what you need to be doing.
I think we are so programmed to learn discomfort as a red light. Oh, I really want to anything, start a workout routine, start a business, go on the dating app, whatever, but there's discomfort. Our brain automatically thinks, oh, red light, that means we shouldn't do it. Stop. Discomfort is bad. And instead, we can look at discomfort as a green light. Like that means growth. Lean into that. If you're feeling uncomfortable, that probably means that's the right thing for you to do in order to grow. So I love that discomfort is, it's just like reframing it as a positive instead of something that holds us back.
Exactly. I was on the phone with a really, really good friend from college yesterday, and she's been at her firm for 7 years. And she recently tried something new where she was leading a pitch to get new business, and she had never done that before. She's always been the assigned architect on the account once that job has already been won. So she said, I want to try something different. I want to try to be this bolder version of myself. And she thought the pitch went really well. She did all this work and they didn't get it. And she said, I feel like I tried to do something different. I tried to be more confident. I tried to push myself. And it just makes me really sad that it didn't work out because maybe this isn't for me. And I just said, are you feeling really sad right now? She said, yeah. I was like, good. You should be. Of course, you're not going to win your first pitch. That would be wild. It's a huge account. So, what you need to do is you need to follow this feeling and know that it's a good signal and do this 4 more times. Do this
Mm.
until you win your first pitch that you've run from top to bottom yourself. And that is how you know that you're on the right path, is because you're sad right now, you're disappointed right now. Great, you took a risk.
Then that means you're closer to the goal you want to be at instead of, I think a lot of people do take rejection as that's a sign I shouldn't do this. That's a sign it's not meant for me. They apply to a lot of jobs and don't get any of them, or they go for the client and the client says no, whatever it is. And it's so easy for us to think, "Ah, that's a sign it's not meant for me," instead of, oh no, that's just a sign that I'm one step closer to getting to what is actually meant for me, what I am meant to do. So just
I
it's the
love that.
reframe.
Yes, I love it's true. Every time you experience that discomfort, you are one step closer. And we should seek it out and chase it down. And I think that when people ask, how can I grow my AQ? I always say, embrace chaos. Put yourself in situations that feel really hard for you. And I actually ask myself this question all day, every day. What is the high AQ thing to do today? So it can be as literally as minor as my husband says, we don't feel like cooking. What do you want to order for takeout? And I say, let's try something new. That's a high AQ way of doing things. Or a bigger example is I had a client who asked me to come in and do a workshop for their team. And I have a number of workshops that I've already delivered in the past. And I could have easily said, let's do one of these three that are my go to. But there was this topic that I was kind of interested in exploring, but I just haven't had time. And so I said, let's do this new thing first, because this will be a good excuse for me to learn this new thing. It's probably going to create an additional 15 hours of work for me, more discomfort, not so easy, but a fun excuse to learn something new.
A fun excuse to learn something new instead of, "Oh god, am I gonna be good at this? Can I do this?" The way you frame it changes everything.
Yes, 100%. And we can all take these moments that feel really hard. And as a consolation, we can say to ourselves, at least I'm growing my AQ. And that's what I'd actually tell myself this all the time. It was right before my book launched, and My husband had to go to Tokyo for work for 7 days, so I was solo parenting. My daughter was not feeling well. She was sick. I was sick. And on top of that, we had made all these plans with friends because when you're solo parenting, the weekend breezes by if you just can meet up with your friends and hang out with your kids together. But then the blizzard happened in New York,
Oh, no.
and I was stuck inside with a toddler in my 3rd trimester pregnant, going up and down the stairs, holding the toddler with my big belly, and my husband's not here. And the whole weekend, I just kept saying, "I'm growing my AQ. I'm growing my AQ." And it kind of became a joke, and my daughter was going, "AQ, AQ," and I was like, "Yeah, that's right. That's what we're doing."
That is so funny, but it does change things so much because instead of it being like, "Ugh, I'm suffering, this sucks," it now becomes, "This isn't comfortable, this isn't what I preferred, but this is actually making me better in all these ways." That does translate to your career when you are uncomfortable in this circumstance in your personal life, you're growing your AQ. It, like, reframes everything so that you can add power and intention behind any hardship, any discomfort.
For me, it's all about I'm glad that you said power because it's all about empowerment. How
Mm.
can you empower people to not feel like a victim in their circumstances, to know that they do have those skills and they do have that power? And the second thing is, it's just about happiness because I really believe that life is short and you never know what's going to happen and how fleeting it could actually be. And so if I only have a limited amount of days spinning around on this planet, I want to be happy. And in this world, it's harder and harder for us to find happiness through certainty. And so we have to find it through confidence instead.
Especially in today's day and age, there's so much turmoil and change. And again, with the fear mongering, we're constantly being told the job market is changing, AI is replacing all these jobs. Those conversations normally always scare me. They work, they freak me out. I'm like, I don't know what's about to happen. This seems like a really big deal. I'm scared. And now it's like the switch of like, okay, but I know that I can handle change. I know that no matter what changes, I can handle it. And like you said, okay, then that means we're going to have really strong AQ. Then that means that we're going to really adapt that skill. It feels powerful because you no longer are a victim of circumstances. You can adapt circumstances and adapt yourself with them in order to stay in control of your own life.
Yes, 100%. What I want everyone to feel from this conversation too is that you don't have to have had the perfect on paper background to do the thing that you want to do in life. Because as we said, IQ is no longer relevant. Your even experience in a way is no longer relevant because the playing field has really evened out because you can get all your information from AI. And that is actually really liberating. It opens up more opportunities. And in fact, for the people who have had a little bit of a harder time in life, going to the school of hard knocks, you probably gained a lot of AQ along the way. And I think that's really beautiful. And Josie, I remember when I talked to you 3.5 years ago and you were starting this podcast and you were 3.5 years younger than you are now. And you were like, I'm at the very beginning of this. And guess what? Age didn't matter. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. Experience doesn't matter. And it's so much about adapting and changing. And I said this, I think, before we started recording, but I've loved following the pivots and the adjustments that the podcast has made. And I think that's why it resonates with people is because you didn't get stuck in the status quo. And so the way I look at it is we all have a car that we're driving. It's your IQ, right? It's just like your experience, it's your ability to get things done. But that's a commodity. Everyone can go out and get a car. What matters is you're the driver behind the wheel.
Mm.
So, what are your reflexes like? How responsive are you? How fast can you go? And that's actually what matters, which is really cool because we can all do that, right? It doesn't matter. Like, we're not beholden to how nice our car is anymore.
That's such a genius way to say it. It's like it doesn't matter if you have a Mercedes or a Honda. I have a Honda, so no hate to Hondas.
Yeah.
But if the car swerves in your lane, it doesn't matter which car you have. What matters is that you're able to swerve to avoid it. And
Yes.
that's like the perfect metaphor for life and how, especially our current world is. It doesn't matter what car you're driving, it matters how quickly you can swerve and adapt as the road changes.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh, Liz, you are just like changing lives. Everything you said, I'm like, damn. Thank you so much for joining me again. I would love another episode to ask you all about your thoughts on AI specifically. I feel like you have such an interesting take that we did not even have time to get into. But thank you so much for joining me. We'll have to do this again very, very soon. Where can everybody find you and read the book to learn more about AQ?
The book is called AQ. You can take the archetype quiz at aqquiz.com. You can find the book wherever books are sold. And you can learn more generally about AQ at my website, which is liz-tran.com, or just Google AQ. It'll come up.
I'm sure most of our listeners have heard of you from our first episode, but if not, I highly recommend your first book, The Karma of Success. Mind blowing, mind blowing. Liz, thank you so much for joining me. It was so fun.
Thank you. I love this conversation.
I hope you enjoyed the episode. I know I sure did. Please do not forget to rate, review, and subscribe. It really makes a huge difference for our show so we can keep growing and bringing the content that you love. If you want more info, you can find us at the Evergirl Podcast on Instagram or theeverygirlpodcast.com. Talk to you next week.